The unexpected alliance. Jake Chen stood at the viewport of the Terran diplomatic vessel, watching as the swirling purple atmosphere of Zarthax came into view. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This mission was the culmination of his career as an interstellar diplomat, and quite possibly the most important negotiation in Earth's history. Entering Zarthaxian airspace, Ambassador Chen, the ship's AI announced, "Please prepare for landing." Jake straightened his formal attire, a blend of traditional Earth styles and elements inspired by Zarthaxian fashion. Every detail mattered in these delicate negotiations. Earth desperately needed access to the rare mineral deposits found only on Zarthax, vital for the next generation of faster-than-light drives. Without them, humanity would fall behind in the galactic community. As the ship descended through the lavender clouds, Jake reviewed his mental notes one last time. The Zarthaxians were known for their complex social hierarchies and love of grand gestures. He'd studied their culture for months, determined not to make any faux pas that could jeopardize the treaty. The spires of the Zarthaxian capital came into view, twisting structures that seemed to defy gravity. Jake's breath caught in his throat. No matter how many alien worlds he visited, the wonder never faded. The ship touched down on a landing pad adjacent to the royal palace. A delegation of Zarthaxians awaited him, their iridescent scales shimmering in the planet's pink sunlight. Jake took a deep breath and strode down the gangway, a practiced smile on his face. Ambassador Chen, the lead Zarthaxian, greeted him, voice melodious despite the alien vocal cords. "I am Siskar, Royal Chamberlain. Welcome to Zarthax." Jake bowed slightly, careful to maintain eye contact as was Zarthaxian custom. "Thank you, Chamberlain Siskar. I am honored to be here." The formalities continued as Jake was led through the twisting corridors of the royal palace. His trained diplomat's eye took in every detail, the intricate murals depicting Zarthaxian history, the subtle positioning of guards, the curious glances from courtiers. Everything could be valuable information for the negotiations ahead. Finally, they arrived at the grand doors of the throne room. Siskar turned to Jake, his expression unreadable. "Ambassador, you must understand. Our king values unconventional solutions. Be prepared for anything." Before Jake could ask for clarification, the doors swung open. He stepped into a cavernous chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. At the far end, upon a dais of swirling metal, sat King Zorax VII of Zarthax. The alien monarch's scales rippled with patterns of light, a sign of strong emotion in their species. Jake approached the throne and performed the elaborate series of bows required by Zarthaxian protocol. "Your Majesty, I bring greetings from Earthand." "Enough formalities, Ambassador," King Zorax interrupted, his voice booming through the chamber. "Let us speak plainly. You want our xanthium deposits. We want assurances of Earth's long-term commitment to Zarthax's security." Jake blinked, caught off guard by the king's directness. He recovered quickly. "Your Majesty is correct. Earth values Zarthax as an ally and trading partner. We're prepared to offer significant technological and defensive assistance in exchange for mining rights." King Zorax's scales flashed with patterns Jake couldn't interpret. "Pretty words, Ambassador. But words and promises are easily broken. We require something more binding." A sense of unease crept over Jake. This wasn't following any of the scenarios he prepared for. "What did your Majesty have in mind?" The king's gaze seemed to pierce right through him. "A union, Ambassador Chen. A marriage to bind our worlds together." Jake's diplomatic mask nearly slipped. "Marriage, Your Majesty." King Zorax gestured, and a side door opened. A figure glided into the room, and Jake had to stop himself from gasping aloud. It was clearly a female Zarthaxian, but unlike any he'd seen before. Where most of the species had sleek, iridescent scales, hers were rough and mottled. Her limbs seemed slightly out of proportion, and her features were asymmetrical by Zarthaxian standards. "My daughter, Princess Silara," King Zorax announced. "You will wed her, binding our houses and our worlds together. This is my offer, Ambassador. Take it, and the Xanthium mines are yours. Refuse, and you may leave Zarthax empty-handed." Jake's mind raced. This had to be some kind of test or negotiation tactic. Surely the king couldn't be serious. But as he looked between the impassive monarch and the princess, who stood with quiet dignity despite the clear disdain from the surrounding courtiers, he realized this was no bluff. He opened his mouth, not sure what would come out. Every instinct screamed that this was madness, that he should refuse and find another way. But then his eyes met Solara's. There was intelligence there, and a spark of something else. Hope. Determination. In that moment, Jake made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart, "I would be honored to accept Princess Solara's hand in marriage and to forge this union between our worlds." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled Zarthaxians. King Zorax's scales flashed with surprise before settling into a pattern Jake recognized as satisfaction. "Well said, Ambassador, or shall I say, Prince Consort. Let the preparations begin at once." As the throne room erupted into a flurry of activity, Jake found himself face to face with his unexpected bride-to-be. Zilara regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "You didn't have to agree," she said softly, her voice musical despite her unusual appearance. "I know what the court thinks of me, what your people will think." Jake surprised himself with his reply. "Maybe it's time both our peoples learn to look beyond appearances, Your Highness." A small smile tugged at Solara's lips. "Please call me Solara. If we're to be married, we should at least be on a first-name basis." As they were swept up in the whirlwind of wedding preparations, Jake's mind spun with the implications of what he'd just agreed to. He'd come to Zarthax expecting tough negotiations. Instead, he'd wound up engaged to an alien princess. Somehow, he had to turn this unexpected twist into a success for both Earth and Zarthax, and figure out how to build a life with a wife he'd just met. The news of the impending marriage spread like wildfire through the royal palace and beyond. Jake found himself at the center of a diplomatic storm. Earth's government was in an uproar, demanding explanations and assurances. The Zarthaxian court buzzed with rumors and speculation. Through it all, Jake and Solara were thrust together, trying to make sense of their sudden engagement. "I never thought anyone would agree to marry me," Solara confided during a rare moment alone in the palace gardens. The alien flora pulsed with bioluminescence around them, casting a soft glow on her unusual features. "My appearance, it's considered a great misfortune among my people." Jake studied her, seeing beyond the initial shock of her non-standard Zarthaxian looks. There was a grace to her movements, an intelligence in her eyes that transcended physical appearance. On Earth we have a saying, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." Your worth isn't determined by how you look. Solara's scales shimmered with a pattern Jake was learning to recognize as emotion. "Your people must be very wise. Here, I've always been seen as a burden, an embarrassment to the royal line." "Then they're fools," Jake said with sudden vehemence that surprised even himself. "In the short time I've known you, I've seen your intelligence, your dignity. Those are far more important than conforming to some arbitrary standard of beauty." A comfortable silence fell between them. Jake found himself wondering if perhaps this unexpected arrangement might lead to something genuine. But before he could pursue that thought, reality came crashing back in the form of Suzkar, the royal chamberlain. "Ambassador, Prince Consort," Suzkar corrected himself, scales flickering with what Jake interpreted as discomfort. "A delegation from Earth has arrived. They're quite insistent on speaking with you." Jake sighed. He'd known this confrontation was coming. "I'll be there shortly." He turned to Solara. "Duty calls. Will you be all right?" She nodded, a determined set to her unusual features. "Go. Show them that this union is more than a political maneuver. Make them see the potential in what we're building." Bolstered by her words, Jake strode to meet the Earth delegation. He found himself face to face with Admiral Helena Reyes, Earth's top military commander and a notorious hardliner when it came to alien relations. "Chen, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Reyes hissed, dispensing with formalities. "Marrying an alien princess. Have you lost your mind?" Jake stood his ground. "I'm securing Earth's access to vital resources and forging a powerful alliance, Admiral. Exactly what I was sent here to do." "By shackling yourself to some alien freak," Reyes spat. "You're supposed to be a diplomat, not a sacrificial lamb." Something in Jake snapped. The casual cruelty, the blind prejudice. It was everything he fought against in his career as a diplomat. "That alien freak is a princess of Zarthax and my future wife," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You will show her the respect she deserves, Admiral. This union may not be what any of us expected, but it's our best chance at a lasting peace and prosperity for both our worlds." Reyes looked taken aback by Jake's vehemence. For a moment, he saw a flicker of something like respect in her eyes. Then her military mask slipped back into place. "Fine, but you better make this work, Chen. The stakes are too high for anything less than total success." As the Earth delegation withdrew to consider the new reality, Jake felt a presence at his side. Sil'Aura had silently joined him, her odd-looking hand slipping into his. "You defended me," she said softly. "No one's ever done that before." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "Get used to it. We're in this together now, come what may." As they stood there, an unlikely pair against a backdrop of alien splendor, Jake realized that this unexpected alliance might just be the beginning of something revolutionary. Humanity had taken its first real steps into a larger galaxy, and he and Sil'Aura were at the forefront of that journey. The wedding preparations accelerated, a whirlwind of alien customs and human traditions blended together in a ceremony unlike any the galaxy had seen. Through it all, Jake and Sil'Aura found themselves drawing closer, united by the challenges they faced. As the twin suns of Zarthax set on the eve of their wedding, painting the sky in impossible colors, Jake looked at his bride-to-be and felt a surge of determination. Whatever the galaxy threw at them, they would face it together. And just maybe, they would change the course of history in the process. Cultural clash and hidden strengths. The day of the unprecedented human Zarthaxian royal wedding dawned, bathing the capital city in an ethereal lavender light. Jake Chen, newly minted Prince Consort of Zarthax, stood before a mirror, adjusting his ceremonial attire, a fusion of his crisp Terran diplomatic uniform and flowing Zarthaxian robes that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. "Nervous, Ambassador?" The gravelly voice belonged to Grax, an elderly Zarthaxian assigned as Jake's cultural advisor. The alien's scales were dulled with age, but his eyes sparkled with mischief. Jake let out a shaky breath. "Terrified might be more accurate, Brax. I'm about to marry an alien princess I barely know, with the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. No pressure, right?" Grax made a sound that Jake had learned was the Zarthaxian equivalent of a chuckle. "You humans and your sarcasm, it's refreshing. Most Zarthaxians would be too concerned with saving face to admit fear." "Well, honesty is supposed to be the foundation of any good marriage," Jake quipped, then sobered. "I just hope Sil'Aura and I can make this work. There's so much riding on us." A commotion outside drew their attention. Jake moved to the window, his eyes widening at the scene below. A crowd had gathered, a mix of Zarthaxians and the small human delegation. But instead of celebration, there seemed to be tension in the air. "Abomination." A voice rose above the murmur. "This union is an insult to Zarthax." Jake's fists clenched as he recognized the speaker, Lord Vexicor, a prominent member of the Zarthaxian nobility who had been vocally opposed to the marriage from the start. The pompous alien was addressing the crowd, his scales flashing patterns of disgust and outrage. "Our foolish king would have us pollute our royal bloodline with human DNA. And for what? To shackle our great empire to a backwater mudball. Vexcor's words drew mutters of agreement from some in the crowd. Before Jake could react, another voice cut through the din, one he recognized with a mixture of dread and grudging respect. "You want to talk about pollution, lizard man?" Admiral Helena Reyes, resplendent in her dress uniform, strode forward to face Vexcor. "How about we discuss the environmental damage your xanthium mining has caused on a dozen worlds? Earth's backwater technology could revolutionize your industry, make it cleaner and more efficient. But I guess you're too busy admiring your own scales to see the bigger picture." The crowd's mood shifted, with both humans and Zarthaxians now watching the confrontation with rapt attention. Jake groaned inwardly. This was exactly the kind of diplomatic incident he'd hoped to avoid. "I have to get down there," he said to Grax, already moving towards the door, "if this gets out of hand." He was cut off by a new voice, one that rang out clear and commanding over the squabbling below. Jake rushed back to the window, his heart skipping a beat at what he saw. Princess Silara stood on a balcony overlooking the crowd, her unconventional features set in a mask of regal authority. Gone was the shy, reserved alien he'd come to know over the past weeks. In her place stood every inch a royal, her rough scales gleaming with an inner fire. "People of Zarthax, honored guests from Earth," Silara's voice carried effortlessly, a musical quality underlying her words. "I stand before you not just as your princess, but as a symbol of our future. Yes, I look different. Yes, this union is unprecedented. But ask yourselves this: has clinging to the old ways brought us the prosperity and security we desire?" The crowd fell silent, hanging on her every word. Even Vexcor and Reyes seemed taken aback by the princess's sudden appearance and commanding presence. "For too long, we have judged worth by appearance, by adherence to tradition. But the galaxy is changing. New challenges arise that cannot be met with old thinking. This marriage," she gestured towards Jake's window, though she couldn't have known he was there, "is more than a political alliance. It is a chance for both our peoples to grow, to learn from each other, to become stronger together than we ever could be apart." Jake felt a swell of pride and admiration. This was a side of Silara he hadn't seen before, and it was magnificent. She continued, her words weaving a vision of a future where human ingenuity and Zarthaxian wisdom combined to forge a new path for both species. As Silara spoke, Jake noticed something extraordinary. The bioluminescent patterns in her scales, usually muted and irregular, were coming alive. They pulsed with light, forming intricate, mesmerizing designs that seemed to enhance her words, telling a story beyond mere language. The Zarthaxians in the crowd were transfixed, their own scales flickering in response. "She's broadcasting empathically," Grax whispered in awe. "It's a rare gift, thought to have died out in the royal line generations ago. Your princess is full of surprises, Ambassador." When Silara finished speaking, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then, starting softly but quickly growing, came the sound of applause, human hands clapping, Zarthaxian tails thumping rhythmically. The atmosphere had transformed from one of tension to cautious hope and excitement. Jake didn't realize he was moving until he found himself on the balcony beside Silara. She turned to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of exhilaration and nervousness. "Did I do all right?" she asked softly, suddenly unsure. "I've never spoken in public like that before." In response, Jake did something that would become the subject of gossip, diplomatic analysis, and eventually legend throughout the galaxy. He took Silara's face gently in his hands and kissed her, right there in front of the assembled crowd. The cheers redoubled, drowning out the few remaining voices of dissent. As Jake pulled back, he saw Silara's scales flickering with patterns he now recognized as joy and embarrassment. "I'd say you did more than all right," he grinned. "I think you just changed the course of history." As they turned to wave to the now enthusiastic crowd, Jake caught sight of Admiral Reyes. The hardened military commander gave him a brief nod, something like respect in her eyes. Even Lord Vexcor seemed subdued, though Jake had no doubt the pompous noble would cause more trouble in the future. Are you ready for this? Jake asked Silara quietly as they prepared to descend and begin the wedding ceremony. Once we go through with it, there's no turning back. The entire galaxy will be watching our every move. Silara's hand found his, her rough scales a strangely comforting texture against his skin. I've spent my whole life being watched and judged, she replied. But for the first time, I feel like I have the power to change how I'm seen. How we're both seen. She squeezed his hand. Together, we can show everyone that true strength comes from embracing our differences, not fearing them. As they made their way down to the grand ceremonial hall, Jake marveled at how much had changed in just a few short weeks. He'd come to Zarthax expecting tense negotiations. Instead, he'd found an unlikely partner, a chance to bridge two worlds, and just maybe, the beginnings of something that could reshape the galaxy. The wedding itself was a blur of color, sound, and sensation. Ancient Zarthaxian rituals blended with Terran traditions, creating something entirely new. As Jake and Silara exchanged vows in both their languages, he felt a sense of optimism he hadn't expected. They were an odd pair, a human diplomat and an unconventional alien princess, but together they just might be exactly what both their worlds needed. As the twin sons of Zarthax set on the first day of their married life, casting the world in a riot of impossible colors, Jake and Silara stood on the palace balcony, looking out over the city. The challenges ahead were daunting. Cultural misunderstandings to navigate, political opponents to win over, and a galaxy of prejudices to overcome. But in that moment, with Silara's hand in his and a shared sense of purpose between them, Jake felt ready to take on whatever the universe might throw their way. Little did they know that the greatest test of their union, and the most shocking scandal the galaxy had ever seen, was just around the corner. The Galactic scandal. 6 months after the unprecedented wedding that united Earth and Zarthax, Jake Chen found himself pacing nervously in the royal medical wing. The alien architecture, all swooping curves and bioluminescent pulsing, did little to calm his frayed nerves. He stopped abruptly as the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Dr. Zixtara, the chief royal physician. "Well?" Jake asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Dr. Zixtara's scales rippled with a pattern Jake had learned to recognize as a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Congratulations, Prince Consort. The tests are conclusive. Princess Silara is indeed pregnant." The words hit Jake like a gravitational shockwave. Pregnant, it shouldn't have been possible. The genetic gap between humans and Zarthaxians was supposed to be too vast. Yet somehow, he managed to croak out. Dr. Zixtara's tendrils waved in the Zarthaxian equivalent of a shrug. "We're still analyzing the data, but it appears Princess Silara's unique genetic structure has made the impossible possible. This is unprecedented in galactic history." Jake's mind raced. A child, his and Silara's. A bridge between two species, living proof that humanity and alien life could not just coexist, but create something entirely new. It was miraculous, world-changing, and absolutely terrifying. "Does Silara know?" he asked. "I wanted to inform you both together," Dr. Zixtara replied. "She's waiting in the royal chambers. And Prince Consort, congratulations again. You're about to make history, again." As Jake hurried through the twisting corridors of the palace, his emotions oscillated between elation and panic. He and Silara had grown close over the past months, their arranged marriage blossoming into genuine affection and partnership. But this was beyond anything they prepared for. He found Silara in their shared quarters, gazing out at the swirling purple skies of Zarthax. She turned as he entered, her unusual features soft with concern. "Jake, what did Dr. Zixtara say? Am I?" He nodded, a smile breaking through his shock. "We're going to be parents, Silara. Somehow, against all odds, we've created a life together." Silara's scales lit up with joy, the bioluminescent patterns dancing across her skin in mesmerizing swirls. She rushed into Jake's arms, and for a moment, they simply held each other, marveling at the miracle they created. But reality quickly reasserted itself. Zilara pulled back, her eyes wide with sudden understanding. "Jake, do you realize what this means? Our child, they'll be the first of their kind. A new species, born of two worlds." "They'll change everything," Jake agreed, his diplomatic mind already racing ahead. "The political implications alone." Before they could discuss further, an urgent chime filled the room. Jake activated the communication panel to find the harried face of Sizkar, the royal chamberlain. "My deepest apologies for the intrusion, your highnesses, but we have a situation." Sizkar's scales flickered with distress. "Somehow, news of the pregnancy has leaked. It's spreading across the galactic networks like wildfire. We're being inundated with demands for statements from every major world and media outlet in the known universe." Jake and Zilara exchanged a look of dismay. They'd barely had time to process the news themselves, and now the entire galaxy knew. "How bad is it?" Jake asked, dreading the answer. Sizkar's tendrils drooped. "Bad, your highness. There are already protests forming outside the palace. Some Zarthaxian traditionalists are calling it an abomination, a corruption of our royal bloodline. And I'm afraid some of the less open-minded factions on Earth are reacting similarly." Silara's hand found Jake's, squeezing it tightly. "We knew there would be opposition," she said, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. "But this child is a miracle, a symbol of unity. We have to make them see that." Jake nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Sizkar, arrange a press conference. We'll address this head-on. No hiding, no apologies. It's time to show the galaxy what true unity looks like." As Sizkar hurried off to make arrangements, Jake turned to Zilara. "Are you sure about this? Once we go public, there's no going back. The entire galaxy will be watching our every move, judging our child before they're even born." Zilara's scales rippled with a pattern Jake now recognized as fierce determination. "I've been judged my entire life for being different," she said. "Our child will face challenges, yes, but they also have something I never did growing up: two parents who will love and support them unconditionally, no matter what they look like or how the galaxy sees them." Moved by her words, Jake pulled Zilara close, marveling at how this arranged marriage had grown into something so profound. As they held each other, a plan began to form in Jake's mind. This wasn't just a scandal to be managed, it was an opportunity to reshape galactic perceptions. Hours later, they stood before a sea of reporters from across the galaxy, hovering camera drones, telepathic recorders, and beings of all shapes and sizes clamoring for a statement. The grand hall of the Zarthaxian palace buzzed with an energy that was equal parts excitement and hostility. Jake stepped forward, Zilara at his side, their hands clasped in a visible show of unity. He took a deep breath, knowing the words he was about to speak would echo across star systems. "People of Earth, citizens of Zarthax, sentient beings of the galactic community," he began, his voice clear and strong. "Today, we stand before you not just as political figures, but as two individuals blessed with a miracle. Against all scientific predictions, my wife, Princess Zilara, and I are expecting a child." A wave of murmurs swept through the assembled crowd. Jake pressed on. "We understand this news may come as a shock to many. Some may call it impossible, unnatural, even wrong. But we ask you this: isn't this precisely the kind of miracle our ancestors dreamed of when they first looked to the stars? A universe where different species could not only coexist, but create something beautiful and new together." Zilara stepped forward, her scales glowing with subtle, calming patterns. "This child is a symbol of hope," she added, her melodic voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Hope that our differences can be bridges rather than barriers. Hope that love and understanding can overcome millennia of separation and mistrust." As they continued to speak, Jake noticed a shift in the room. The initial hostility was giving way to curiosity, even cautious excitement. They outlined their vision for the future, a galaxy where their child could grow up without fear of prejudice, where interspecies cooperation could solve problems neither world could tackle alone. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. Lord Vexicor, the same Zarthaxian noble who had protested their wedding, pushed his way to the front. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, scales flashing angry patterns. "You would pollute our royal bloodline with human DNA. This abomination cannot be allowed to." He was cut off by a surprising source, Admiral Helena Reyes, the once skeptical human military commander. She stepped between Vexicor and the royal couple, her voice ringing out. "That's enough," Reyes snapped. "I had my doubts about this union at first, I'll admit it, but I've seen what Ambassador Chen and Princess Silara have accomplished in just a few months. Trade agreements that would have taken years to negotiate, scientific breakthroughs neither of our species could have achieved alone." She turned to face the crowd, her expression fierce. "This child represents the future, a future where humanity reaches its full potential by working alongside our galactic neighbors, not fearing them." A cheer went up from the assembled humans. Even some of the Zarthaxians were nodding in agreement. Vexicor, finding himself suddenly without support, slunk back into the crowd. As the press conference concluded, Jake and Silara found themselves surrounded by well-wishers from both planets. The tide of public opinion was turning, slowly but surely. Later that night, as they watched the triple moons of Zarthax rise from their private balcony, Jake pulled Silara close. "That went better than I expected," he murmured. Silara's scales flickered with amusement. "Did you doubt us? Together, we're unstoppable." Jake chuckled, then grew serious. "It won't all be this easy. There will be more challenges ahead, more people who fear what our child represents." "Let them fear," Silara said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "We'll meet every challenge with love, understanding, and the unshakable belief that our child, and the future they represent, is worth fighting for." As they stood there, bathed in the ethereal light of the alien moons, Jake felt a profound sense of purpose. This unexpected pregnancy had thrust them into the spotlight of galactic politics in a way neither could have anticipated, but it had also given them a chance to reshape the very fabric of interstellar society. Whatever trials lay ahead, Jake knew that he and Silara would face them together, and in doing so, they just might usher in a new era of unity for all sentient beings across the cosmos. Rising to the challenge. As news of the unprecedented human Zarthaxian pregnancy spread across the galaxy, Jake and Silara found themselves at the center of a political and cultural firestorm. Their story became the most discussed topic on every inhabited world, sparking heated debates about the future of interspecies relations. "Galactic unity or genetic abomination" blared the headlines on Earth's news networks. Zarthaxian information spheres pulsed with urgent discussions about the implications for their royal lineage. Across 1,000 worlds, beings of all species watched and wondered what this development would mean for the cosmic order. Despite the controversy, Jake and Silara were determined to use their unique position to bring about positive change. They embarked on a groundbreaking tour of key worlds in the galactic community, dubbed by media outlets as the Stellar Unity Journey. Their first stop was New Mars, humanity's most distant colony and a hub of scientific research. As their ship descended through the terraformed atmosphere, Jake squeezed Silara's hand. "Ready for this?" he asked, noting the nervous flicker of her scales. Silara nodded, her unique features set in determination. "Always, as long as we're together." They stepped out onto the red soil of New Mars to a mixed reception. A crowd had gathered, some cheering, others holding signs with xenophobic slogans. But as Jake and Silara began to speak, sharing their vision of a united galaxy, something remarkable happened. Silara's scales began to glow, pulsing with mesmerizing patterns that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. The crowd fell silent, transfixed. "She's tapping into the planet's electromagnetic field," a nearby scientist gasped. "It's amplifying her empathic broadcast." As Silara spoke of hope and unity, Her words carried an emotional weight that transcended language. Tears streamed down the faces of humans in the audience. Even the protesters lowered their signs, caught up in the wave of understanding and compassion. Jake, watching in awe, realized that Silara's unique genetic structure, once seen as a flaw, was actually a gift that allowed her to connect with other species on a profound level. It was a powerful metaphor for their mission, turning perceived weaknesses into strengths that could bring the galaxy together. Their journey continued, each stop bringing new challenges and unexpected allies. On the gas giant Jovia, they addressed a conference of non-humanoid species, beings who had long felt excluded from galactic politics. "Our child will be born into a galaxy of incredible diversity," Jake declared, his words translated into a cacophony of whistles, clicks, and pheromone bursts. "We stand before you today to say that every sentient being, regardless of form, has a place in the future we're building." The chamber erupted in a chorus of alien cheers. Representatives from a dozen worlds pledged their support to the couple's vision of unity. But not every encounter was so positive. On Zarthax itself, they faced their greatest challenge yet. A group of conservative nobles, led by the ever-troublesome Lord Vexcor, had organized a massive protest against the dilution of royal blood. As Jake and Silara approached the palace, they found their path blocked by thousands of angry Zarthaxians. The air crackled with tension, and for a moment, it seemed violence was inevitable. Then, Silara did something unprecedented. She stepped forward alone, her scales dimming to a soft, vulnerable glow. In a clear, unwavering voice, she began to sing. It was an ancient Zarthaxian lullaby, one sung by mothers to their hatchlings for countless generations. But as Silara sang, her unique empathic abilities infused the melody with the emotions of her journey, the fear, the hope, the love she discovered with Jake, and the deep, abiding wish for her child to be accepted. The effect was electric. The protesters fell silent, many sinking to their knees as the weight of generations of tradition and the promise of a new future washed over them. Even Lord Vexicor, his scales flickering in confusion, lowered his head in a gesture of respect. As the last notes faded, an elderly Zarthaxian stepped forward. Jake recognized him as Krextor, the keeper of royal genealogy. "For too long, we have clung to old ways, fearing change," Krextor's voice quavered with emotion. "But in this union, in the child has produced, I see the future of not just Zarthax, but of all species. Princess Silara, Prince Jake, your offspring will have a place in our genealogy. May they inherit the best of both worlds and lead us all to a brighter tomorrow." The crowd, moved by Krextor's words and Silara's song, parted to let the couple pass. It was a turning point, not just for Zarthax, but for the entire galactic community. As their journey neared its end, Jake and Silara were invited to address the Galactic Council itself, a rare honor typically reserved for only the most influential leaders. The council chamber was a marvel of engineering, a space station at the heart of the galaxy where representatives from every recognized world gathered to shape interstellar policy. Jake stood at the podium, Silara by his side, facing the assembled delegates of 100 species. This was the moment that would define their mission, their legacy, and the future of their unborn child. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Jake began, his voice steady and clear. "We come before you not just as representatives of Earth and Zarthax, but as living proof that the divisions between our species are not as insurmountable as we once believed." Silara stepped forward, her scales shimmering with a kaleidoscope of colors that reflected off the chamber's crystal walls. "The child we carry is not a threat to be feared, but a promise to be embraced. A promise that we can move beyond tolerance to true acceptance and celebration of our differences." As they laid out their vision for the future, increased cultural exchange programs, joint scientific ventures, and a new framework for interspecies families, the chamber buzzed with excitement. Species that had been ancestral enemies found common ground in the hope Jake and Silara offered. When the speech concluded, the council erupted into applause. The speaker, a being of pure energy, floated forward. In all my centuries, I have never witnessed such a compelling argument for unity. The speaker's thoughts resonated through the chamber. Let it be recorded that on this day, the Galactic Council pledges its full support to the vision of a truly united cosmos, as embodied by Jake Chen, Silara, and their forthcoming child. As Jake and Silara left the council chamber, exhausted but elated, they were met by a familiar face, Admiral Helena Reyes, who had become an unlikely ally in their journey. "Not bad for a diplomat and a princess everyone underestimated," Reyes said with a rare smile. "You've done more for Earth standing in the galaxy than a fleet of battleships ever could." Jake grinned, pulling Silara close. "We couldn't have done it without supporters like you, Admiral, but our work is just beginning." Silara nodded, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Our child will be born into a changing galaxy, one we're shaping together. There will be challenges ahead, but also incredible opportunities." As they boarded their ship for the journey home, Jake took one last look at the glittering expanse of stars visible through the station's viewport. Each point of light represented a world, a species, a potential friend or ally in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. He turned to Silara, seeing the same wonder reflected in her alien eyes. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked. Silara's scales flickered with joy and determination. "Always, my love. The galaxy is waiting, and our story is just beginning." As their ship engaged its faster-than-light drive, streaking away in a blaze of quantum energy, Jake and Silara held each other close. They had faced mockery, overcome prejudice, and kindled hope across the stars. Now, with their miraculous child on the way, they were ready to usher in a new era of galactic unity, one where the extraordinary became possible, and the bonds between species grew stronger than the vast distances between the stars. A new era dawns. The anticipation was palpable across the galaxy as the due date for Jake and Silara's unprecedented child approached. News networks from every corner of known space had their attention fixed on Zarfax, waiting with bated breath for the birth that would change history. In the Royal Medical Facility, a team of the finest xenobiologists, geneticists, and medical professionals from both Earth and Zarfax worked tirelessly to ensure everything was prepared for the momentous event. The air crackled with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Jake paced anxiously outside the birthing chamber, his mind racing. The past months had been a whirlwind of diplomatic missions, scientific breakthroughs, and preparations for their child's arrival. Now, the moment of truth was upon them. A gentle hand on his shoulder broke him from his reverie. He turned to find Admiral Reyes, her usually stern features softened with concern. "How are you holding up, Chen?" she asked. Jake managed a weak smile. "About as well as can be expected when you're about to become the father of a new species." Reyes nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I've seen a lot in my years of service, but nothing quite like this. You and Silara, you've changed everything. Whatever happens in there, know that you've already made history." Before Jake could respond, a commotion from inside the birthing chamber caught their attention. The door slid open, revealing Dr. Zixtara, her scales flickering with excitement. "It's time," she announced. Jake's heart leaped into his throat as he rushed into the room. The sight that greeted him would be forever etched in his memory. Silara lay on a bioadaptive bed, her scales glowing with an intensity Jake had never seen before. The room was bathed in a soft, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from Silara herself. As Jake approached, he saw the reason for the extraordinary luminescence. Cradled in Silara's arms was their child, a perfect blend of human and Zarfaxian features. The infant's skin was smooth like a human's, but with a subtle, shimmering quality reminiscent of Zarfaxian scales. Its eyes, when they fluttered open, were startlingly beautiful, iridescent orbs that seemed to contain entire galaxies. But most remarkable of all was the gentle glow emanating from the child's skin, pulsing in perfect synchronization with Silara's bioluminescent patterns. "Jake," Silara's voice was filled with wonder, "Meet our daughter." As Jake took the child in his arms, he felt a surge of emotion unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Joy, love, and a profound sense of responsibility washed over him. This tiny being represented the hopes and dreams of two worlds, no, of an entire galaxy. "She's perfect," Jake whispered, tears streaming down his face. Dr. Zixtara approached, her medical scanner hovering over the infant. "Preliminary readings are fascinating," she reported. "Her genetic structure is a true hybrid, incorporating the best traits of both species. And her bioluminescent abilities, they're off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." As news of the successful birth spread, the galaxy erupted in celebration. Holographic fireworks lit up the skies of 1,000 worlds. On Earth, crowds gathered in streets and plazas, cheering for the child that represented a new era of interstellar cooperation. Even on the most distant colonies, beings of all species joined together to mark the historic moment. In the days that followed, as Jake and Silara adjusted to parenthood under the watchful eyes of the galaxy, they faced the daunting task of naming their daughter. They wanted a name that would honor both her human and Zarthaxian heritage while symbolizing the new future she represented. After much deliberation, they settled on Aurora Zaran Chen, Aurora for the Earth's celestial lights, Zan as a nod to Zarthaxian naming conventions, and Chen to carry on Jake's family name. As Aurora grew, it became clear that she was extraordinary in ways no one could have predicted. Her bioluminescent abilities developed rapidly, allowing her to communicate complex emotions and even basic thoughts through intricate patterns of light. By her first birthday, she was already bridging communication gaps between species that had struggled to understand each other for millennia. But Aurora's gifts came with challenges. As the first of her kind, she faced intense scrutiny and, at times, fear from those who didn't understand her. Jake and Silara worked tirelessly to protect their daughter while also allowing her to become the symbol of unity she was destined to be. 5 years after Aurora's birth, the Chen Zarthax family stood before the Galactic Council once again. This time, however, it was Aurora who addressed the assembled delegates, her young voice clear and confident, her skin glowing with patterns that transcended the need for verbal language. "People of the galaxy," Aurora began, her words accompanied by mesmerizing swirls of light, "I stand before you as living proof that our differences are not barriers, but bridges. In my very DNA, I carry the promise of what we can achieve when we come together." As she spoke, sharing her experiences and her vision for the future, hardened diplomats found themselves moved to tears. Species that had been locked in centuries-old conflicts began to see the possibility of reconciliation. Jake and Silara watched with pride as their daughter, not yet old enough to attend school on either of her ancestral worlds, began to reshape the political landscape of the entire galaxy. In the years that followed, Aurora's influence only grew. She became a beacon of hope, a living embodiment of unity that inspired new levels of cooperation and understanding across the cosmos. Under her guidance, joint scientific ventures led to revolutionary discoveries. Cultural exchange programs flourished, breaking down millennia of mistrust and isolation. But perhaps most remarkably, Aurora's existence paved the way for other interspecies relationships. What had once been taboo became increasingly accepted, as beings across the galaxy realized that love and compatibility transcended the boundaries of species. As Jake and Silara celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, surrounded by a family that now included Aurora and her 2 younger siblings, each unique in their own spectacular ways, they marveled at how far they had come. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Silara asked, her scales shimmering with contentment as they watched their children play, Aurora teaching her siblings new ways to combine their bioluminescent abilities. Jake shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "Not in my wildest dreams. When I first arrived on Zarthax, I thought I was just negotiating a trade deal. Instead, I found a partner, a family, and a whole new future for the galaxy." Silara leaned into him, her unusual features still as captivating to Jake as the day they met. And to think, it all started because a human diplomat was willing to see beyond appearances and take a chance on an ugly alien princess. Jake laughed, pulling her close. I think you mean because a visionary Zarfaxan princess was willing to take a chance on a clueless human diplomat. As the twin suns of Zarfax set, painting the sky in impossible colors, Jake and Silara stood together, watching their children, the living embodiments of their love and the bright future they had helped create. The galaxy had mocked them, doubted them, and finally embraced them, and in doing so, it had been transformed. Their story, of love overcoming prejudice, of unity born from diversity, had become legend. But for Jake and Silara, it was simply the life they had built together, one challenge, one triumph, one miracle at a time. As night fell and the stars came out, each one a potential new adventure waiting to be explored, the Chen Zarfax family looked to the future with hope and excitement, for they had learned that in a vast and wondrous universe, anything was possible if you had the courage to reach for it.